it wasn't long when I started playing around with bread that I just really felt a connection to that. And it's interesting. It's such a different type of process compared to other foods that we make because, um, you know, you're working with yeast, which is a living organism. And so there's that factor. I don't know. It's a beautiful transformation process, and it can be forgiving. It can be forgiving, but it can also be really unforgiving if you don't know what you're doing. So yeah, I doing all those roles in the dining common. I think that's where it kind of started. And I had delivered donuts for a lady during high school, and so I was kind of just always intrigued with yeasted products. And then when I started working in those little bakeries and I was exposed to a lot of categories, I just knew, bread was it's such a great thing because it's tactile, right? And the process is really unique. And then I think bread is like on maybe, I mean, that's an ancient category of food. It goes back ancient civilizations. We have in the Bible both unleavened bread, of course, and regular bread used in the different festivals. And so, yeah, there's such an interesting connection, I think, with culture and history, and there's just something about it. So, yeah. And of course, and maybe you're getting to this, but I did open a bakery with my wife, and there for about 10 years. We did artisan breads out of a wood-fired oven and supplied coffee shops, restaurants, caterers, and some retail places. And that was a lot of fun and a lot of work, but it was a great connection with the business while I was teaching full time.
Was there something that spurred you guys to start the bakery?
Yeah. Okay. So in my years before coming back to Bob Jones to teach, I had worked for two different artisan bread bakeries in upstate South Carolina. And that experience, some other experience I had, I saw that there's definitely a market with chefs who knew food they really wanted good bread. If you could supply them with really good artisan bread, there was a great opportunity for wholesale because a lot of restaurants or hotels, they either don't have the expertise maybe to make bread, but most of the time they don't have the time and space. That is it takes some space. It's because it's bread, you have to wait, right? The bulk fermentation, you have to wait, and time is money in the restaurant. So if we can outsource that, so that's actually a good opportunity for a baker who knows what they're doing. So I had worked in those types of businesses, and I had seen that there was definitely opportunity in Greenville and the surrounding area in South Carolina. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember trying the bread that you were selling and seeing it in the Bob Jones little market area that they
Yeah.
had right next to it, and it was so good. I
Yeah,
remember
I should have
taking it
brought
home.
some.
So good. I'll give you a warning next time I'm coming. I'll be like, hey, I'm coming in a month.
Yeah,
I need some
plenty of
bread
time.
from. I need some bread.
Plenty of time.
But yeah, so is there any lessons that stood out from while you were running that as a business, not necessarily on the baking side, but obviously
Sure.
starting your own business?
Sure. Both some positives and some negatives. I would say on the positive side, I learned some things that I've been able to pass on to students and other people. Food is very competitive. Here in America, we have so many options. So if someone tells me, "Hey, I want to start a business in food," what I'm going to encourage them, one thing I'm going to challenge them on is what makes what you're doing different than the competition. Just because you like to make that, what makes what your product unique enough that it would be selected over someone else's? I think that's a really important thing to think of, whether it's the product itself or other services a business might offer. That also, when for me, the idea was, and we're talking about product here, if it's retail, I'm face to face with people, which is great. But retail is often, it's not nearly as definite as retention of wholesale. So I think, people tend to lean one way or the other in their business, but there's good aspects on both. With wholesale, you have regular cash flow, right? But with retail, you get to tell your story to people. And that's really, really important. I'm face to face with the customer. And if they're sold on my product, they'll actually sell it for me. I think that, so those are some positives. I also think, when it comes to a business, you typically want to focus in on a certain target market, a certain demographic, so to speak. But I learned that with my bread, if I had a variety that I offered in terms of uh, pricing and maybe quantities, like I could sell a baguette for $1.50, $2, and then I might have this loaf that I was charging $7 or $8 for. I had so that the and all kinds of pricing in between. That actually helped me a lot because I had a bigger market. I had people who would just go, "Oh yeah, we'll buy several baguettes," and they wouldn't touch the higher stuff. So those were some positives. I'm a very firm believer that the best marketing is word of mouth. A lot of people invest a lot of time and money in marketing, but if the product is good and unique, it sells itself. I think that's true. So those are some positives. On the negative side, we learned some interesting things. Kath and I had 4 kids. We have 4 kids, but at that time they were all pretty young. So it, I'm teaching full time. It was a little tricky in terms of workload. And I alluded to earlier about the product, making sure your product is unique. One thing that was unique about what we did was we baked everything in a wood-fired oven, which, is another whole timing. It's tricky to have the oven up to heat when your doughs are ready to go. So that there was a lot of rhythm, a lot of timing that had to be kind of calculated out. And physically, it was rough. We did not invest in employees. Okay. So looking back, and there were a lot of all nighters, like years of all night Friday nights, and then after selling bread at markets and dropping bread off, I'd come back and do more bread. And that was brutal. And I think we got kind of caught in the money was good, the product was loved, and I probably should have stopped at some point and said, you know what, let's pull back a little bit, or let's invest in employees. Both of those things. So yeah, because when we closed up shop, God made it really obvious it was time, in a lot of ways. So yeah.
But, I mean, if you don't mind sharing, what made it so obvious?
Well, becoming just to be candid, it was a relational strain. Um, because our quantities had grown and I was teaching full time, there was a lot of pressure on my wife, both run the business and to do a lot of production that when I couldn't. So there was that. Also, because so much of our business was on the weekends, as my kids are getting older, they're like, hey, we
Mm-hmm.
want to do something else on the weekends besides bake
Yeah,
and sell bread. We've been doing this for 10 years now, Dad. So there was a relational part. But then, interestingly enough, I started to have just little things like little equipment failure here. My truck broke down, I don't know, a squirrel ate my electrical and my lighting went out, just all these weird little things. And we thought, okay, yeah, it's probably time. It's probably time. And I actually was starting to develop something in my arm as well. So all those little things just kind of were like signs that maybe we
Yeah,
need
it's
to.
time.
Yeah, yeah. And interesting enough, the business never went away. I mean, even at the very end, there's still plenty of market out there for it. But yeah.
Would you, now, maybe in a few years, kids are gone, out of the house, a little back to normal. Would you consider reopening, maybe with some culinary Bob Jones staff, or like, from the culinary arts department, or just reopening in general?
Maybe, yeah. I'm it's always in that is always kind of in the back of my mind. It's always lingering there. That was 5 years ago. Yeah, that was 5 years ago when we shut it down. And of course, and this is a tricky part. We want to do the will of God, okay? We want to fulfill what he has called us to do. And at the same time, we want to be open to he can actually change what I think I'm supposed to do. He actually
Mm-hmm.
can his plan, the way he's writing it, may be bigger than what I see or want. And that's really tough. That's tough on us guys, I think, because so often we get our sense of worth from our work, getting into the
Mm-hmm.
zone. This is who we are. This is what we do. This is really rewarding. I'm good at it. Right. And I don't know. I was thinking about this the other day in terms of when Jesus called the disciples. You think about, okay, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, we got four fishermen. And, he said, hey, drop that and follow me. And I just wonder if it's possible in their humanness. Maybe one of them was thinking, what? This is what I've been wanting to do all my life. I'm pretty good at fishing. My dad, Zebedee, he taught me how to be a good fisherman. I'm going to take over the business. I'm the best fisherman out here on Galilee, and this is who I am, right? And sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes God might just change the story and say, you know what? I actually have bigger plans than that thing that you find so rewarding. So, yeah. Anyway, take that for what it's worth, but He can move us. And it's not saying I've given up on opening a bakery someday, but there might be other things going on. We'll see.
I think the disciples, I think, are really good. I think for a long time I never really, I always hear you compare yourself to, you want to be a man after God's own heart. You want to be David, the strong warrior king. Of course, makes mistakes, but that's who you think you want to be, or Daniel, some of these other characters. But like, I never really thought to myself, oh, I want to be one of Jesus's disciples. Like, it just never, I want to be like so and so, or you hear, there's some of the more popular ones. But I think in general, because I've brought up the disciples, because, some people were probably in that same boat, like you said, where this is what they wanted to do. I want to be a fisherman, I want to be an accountant. Um, and then there's probably some others that were saying like, hey, because I think if I remember correctly, they were young. They weren't full 50s, 60s. They were young. They were probably in their upper teens, 20s, maybe 30s, somewhere in that range. So very much like God called them, or Jesus called them, and either they weren't ready or didn't think they were ready, but God called them in that moment, or they thought they had some other plan, but God still called
That's
them in
right.
that moment. And I think I think maybe I should be, I don't know, a little bit more focused on, being a Jesus disciple, maybe more so sometimes than I need to be a David, or
That's right.
I need to be some other warrior type.